Here's what I'm looking at in traditional markets for this coming week and the moves that I may or may not be making actually for this coming week as well. Other than that, let's continue on with the series. And of course, if you do like the series, I don't know, consider liking and subscribing on this video. Anyways, let's start it off as always with SPY futures right here, ES1. And what can we see? Well, last week we were bullish based off of the hidden bullish divergence that did begin on that closure from the 24th of November and is now carrying upwards and onwards. So overall, I still look at this signal as valid. I still look at this signal as overall good. We actually have another couple of technical indicators that suggest that, yes, this thing is actually ready to very likely move to the upside, or at least my upside bias remains. And it doesn't necessarily remain because it's 100% guaranteed to go to the upside. No, because thinking as a trader or an investor, there's an extremely obvious invalidation point here. And because of last week's price action beautifully bouncing off the red 5 EMA, I would be using that low, which is 68.02 on SPY futures, again, or the E mini contracts right here, as an invalidation point, meaning that if SPY comes back down below last week's low, then yes, I switch around to being not necessarily bearish, but just looking for a pullback and not looking at this as a trend in motion. But as it stands right now, we are getting a lot of the signals that you would be expecting on a very likely continuation move, in this case to the upside, because the current trend is to the upside as well. Again, just for, just kind of go over the greater picture here, if you weren't around on last week's video or the week before that, well, we did already just witness about a 6% correction on SPY perfectly to that yellow 21 EMA, which is kind of where we expect those corrective higher lows within a general uptrend. On top of this, we saw hidden bullish divergence being confirmed as of last week's closure, now regaining the exponential and also working its way into the bullish control zone on the weekly RSI. And on top of this is all within the context of very low volatility. So this is generally what you expect to see on a continuation consolidation from traditional markets. And in this case, still looking up and to the right. So that begs the question, where? And by the way, I should also acknowledge that I've played around with a lot of my settings on my recording stuff. So this may work out perfectly. This may work out terribly. You be the one to let me know. I guess we'll find out that one a little bit later. But yeah, as far as targets go, or actually before we get into targets for this, I do want to go over the bi-weekly time frame and the 3-week time frame as well, because these ones just closed as of this past Friday. And for the bi-weekly time frame, again, I mean, this is just it's beautiful. It's very beautiful. In fact, we even saw a trade above the prior period's high. So ultimately, this is very much solidified as a higher low at this point. And again, it's not there's never 100% guarantee, but just using last week's low, as long as you're above there, I am just generally bullish, looking for this thing to go up and to the right. The 3-week time frame as well, if I can bring it up right here, I think is even more obvious, as we do see a beautiful wick underneath that red 5 EMA, but closing well above. In fact, even reclaiming the prior period's open on this current week's closure, or this current period's closure. Again, this is a continuation move overall. I really like what I see here, and we're continuing to see just a general trend evolve as this one goes upwards and onwards. Other than that, the monthly time frame, it's very early to kind of judge this, but as long as SPY futures are above that red 5 EMA, it's a continuation of this bull market. Anyways, yes. So on the topic of targets, let's go down to the daily time frame. We acknowledged this on NASDAQ last week, and I think we probably spoke about it on SPY as well, but there was a nice little falling channel right here. If we use the price action pivots, trendline extensions, it kind of lines up with this, or at least it was last week. This week's, less so, just because we have new price action. But this did have a falling channel, which, does have a higher probability breakout to the upside than the downside. And most importantly, it does give us some implied targets upon confirming a breakout, which it did on that closure above 68.25. And that would be pointed up right here towards about a little bit above 7,000, 60-ish region, 765, if you want to be super exact. These are going to be, general areas of interest, not going to be exactly to there. Might be a little more, might be a little bit less, but ultimately, that target is in play. Now, on top of that, we also acknowledge that there was, technically a head and shoulders going on right here. You got your left shoulder over here, you got your head over here, and you got your right shoulder, which was over here. Now, the thing is that when you trade above the high of the right shoulder, then we can apply the measured move, which in this case would have been a downside move, to the upside. And that's what this more longer, girthy green fucking line is doing over here. And that's pointed up significantly higher towards 72.75. I would look at that one with a little bit more of a grain of salt. But yeah, we actually did see Bitcoin. No, we saw SPY futures trade above what would have been that right shoulder on Friday. It was a hair above, but yeah, that does matter and that does count. Here's the thing. While I do look at these upside targets as valid, again, if you see anywhere below last week's low, hold on, I need to sneeze. I'm going to die one day sneezing. I'm telling you right now, it's like the most intense experience of my life. Even more so than coming. But yeah, as far as this goes, as long as it's above last week's low, yes, I'm looking for this target to just generally get hit over time. But there's going to be some ebbs and flows here. So, if things pull back, again, not violating last week's low, but even just pull back a little bit towards like 68.10, that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't violate that condition. But, naturally, you're going to see some ebbs and flows on what would be very likely a continuation move. Now, of course, taking out last week's low would be a big warning sign, but an even bigger warning sign, and what would send this thing into like 10% corrective territory or more, is just taking out the November lows from the 20th at 65.25 or so. Anyways, that's it for SPY. Let's now go over to NASDAQ futures, the tech sector, a sector that I'm personally more interested in. We have a very similar setup over here, but again, just kind of recapping the last couple of weeks, we did see a nearly 10% correction, which is, overall good for me. That's an investable sort of corrective move. So yes, I did add on to positions during that drawdown right there. Of course, I did not get the exact low. Don't need to get the exact low to, make a shit ton of money with long-term investments. But buying this move over here at about 24,500, I'm very, very happy with that. And so what am I doing right now? I'm just holding these positions. I'm not adding right now, except for my very small weekly DCA for, again, very, very long-term investments. These are not trading positions meant to be held short-term. These are very long-term, 5 to 10 year plus long positions. But yeah, we kind of had the same setup here as we did on SPY, which you'll notice a lot. In fact, hidden bullish divergence on that last higher low, correction down at the yellow 21 EMA on low volatility. All of these things give us a similar setup here alongside a nearly 10% correction. So I look at this as the first major higher low within this overall breakout that began from June of 2025, reclaiming the February highs from priorly in 2025. Now, with that said, I'm generally looking for this one to move up and to the right as well. And again, last week's low is a great pivot point. Again, because we're, there's no guarantees, but that does, of course, give us a very strong invalidation. It's super easy to manage a position off of that, meaning that as long as we're above last week's low of 193 and a quarter, very important quarter right there, then yes, I'm just looking up and to the right. If it does fail that low, just, ticking below it by even a second, then yeah, I'm looking for a correction back down to the prior week's low of 24,400 or so. And at that point, there is potential for this thing to fail. But similar to SPY, you got the same sort of formation going on right here. In fact, it's still in there. This would be, as defined by the price action pivots indicator, a falling channel, and there is a measured move to be made off of this one as well. It's going to be somewhere in the vicinity where we kind of already are. In fact, it's nearly already gotten there at just a shade under 26,000 bucks. Of course, Friday's high was 25,870 or so, or 869. Great number right there as well. But yeah, that one very, 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 very close to being hit. Similar, however, to SPY futures, you did have the potential for a head and shoulders derp right here. Left derp, herp, and your right derp over here. On Friday, however, sorry, not SPY, but NASDAQ futures did trade above what would have been that right-hand shoulder. So we could look at this as a potential for a much greater move. Let's see what this implied move would kind of be showing over here. And that's much higher. That is much, much higher towards 28,000 bucks, a bit over 28,000 bucks. So again, that would be a more long-term move. That's not happening this coming week. It's not probably happening this month, but over the next few months, kind of just a major area of interest. Again, with an invalidation below last week's low. Super fucking simple right there. And of course, we got the bi-weekly time frame and the 3-week time frame as well. And I think that these are also very suggestive in and of themselves, reclaiming the 2-week 5 EMA right there, generally good. Again, to bi-weekly RSI back into the bullish control zone in the 3-week time frame over here, that same sort of wick below, and then closing and even reclaiming the prior periods open. I mean, these are all good things. So generally, I'm looking for this thing to trade up and to the right. If you do see a pullback, low 25,000s is fine. Just don't want to take out last week's low very specifically, but low 25s is okay. Low 25 25s, like 25,200 even is okay. But below last week's low, not okay, at least for the short and medium term. Anyways, what else do we have? Just reading my notes really quickly over here. I didn't really go over stochastic momentum, but we will go into gold in a moment. Let's just look at stochastic momentum and see what it's doing right now. Actually, I haven't even checked this out myself, but weekly time frame. It's going to have a chance to cross the upside coming into this new week. The pivot is 69.12. That number will very likely adjust downwards. So I'm expecting this pivot to open up when we get markets trading for this coming week below where current price is. If you have this indicator and you see that happen, that's another really good sign that, yeah, this is ready to kind of run the other way. Again, we don't have that signal just yet. We'll know on tomorrow's live stream for sure. But right now, it's just something to keep an eye on because I do think it's a strong potential. Here is NASDAQ. Similar pivot is 26,165. Again, I expect that number to come down. If it comes down below where, especially where price closed on Friday, I mean, again, that's a signal in and of itself, more or less. Anyways, what else do we have here? Yeah, let's go take a quick look at gold. A quick little gander at gold. Gold's actually quite simple right now. Where's my damn gold chart is the real question, though. Well, I guess I have it right here. But yeah, during this past week, again, I am overall bullish on gold, but I do think that this is a corrective period for it, in which case I am looking for something like this on the LARP lines. We went over this in this past week during one of the live streams, I believe, and I'm still kind of looking at it as something like this. There's been too many rejections at the 4260 region. We saw 1, we saw 2, we saw 3 actually on Friday as well. So, I'm looking at this as likely to come back down towards those range lows, but very likely to put in a higher low. Why? Because all higher term timeframes are still bullish here. Here's our monthly. I mean, this thing can afford a short-term corrective move sideways and down and still be in a great posture long term. Now, I do think that the overall gold rally is going to likely find a major high within these next like 2, maybe 3 at most months. It might even be this month, to be honest with you. But for right now, I'm actually still kind of biased towards this having one more continuation move after having a sort of short/medium term corrective move over the next week or two, coming back down likely to about 4,000, a little bit above 4,000, putting in a higher low, hopefully right on that green 55 EMA. If you see something like that, really good sign. And again, the breakout sort of confirmation would be back above this high on the price action pivot at 42.64, and any sort of a daily closure above there, this thing's gonna, just fly onto new all-time highs, probably somewhere around like 45, probably 45, 4,600, something like that. It's going to be quite nice, I suspect. And I'm just generally bullish on this, especially as long as you're above about 4,000, let's say, on a weekly closing base. Below there, okay, we actually have a real correction going on. But for now, I'd still be biased on this, continuing with this uptrend until proven otherwise, basically. Other than that, we can do a quick look at Bitcoins over here. We'll keep it to just the weekly time frame or the higher term time frames. Here's the 5-day, which just had an update yesterday. And I wanted to, or actually this morning, Actually, I wanted to bring up the HPDR setup right here. So on this new period, we've seen the median on the HPDR come down all the way to 106,200. And that is going to be valid for the next 4.5 days, basically. And while this is happening, we are seeing volatility really contract here, getting well below the moving average as well. So I do think that there's a really good shot for Bitcoin to have a corrective move in this case. Obviously, correction would mean an upside bounce somewhere to that median. Again, do I think it's going to hit in this next 5-day spread? Probably not. I'd be very surprised to see it hit in this next 5-day spread. I don't think Bitcoin's going to get to 106 and, between now and like Wednesday or Thursday. But the period after that, I do think you will see that median hit. The median will very likely come down at that point too. I imagine it's probably gonna be like more around like 98, 99,000 bucks. But again, I do still think that this is kind of a bouncy time for Bitcoin. We're all seeing 5-day HPDRO, which represents directional volatility, have some upside corrective move here. I mean, this is not like a good signal, to be honest. Like it's gotten so overdone that it's due for a pity bounce. But yeah, that still means probably Bitcoin bounces up into the deeper 90s instead of closing below November's low. Again, we could maybe see a wick to December's low or November's low, or maybe even lower. But ultimately, I don't expect any closures below that November low of 80,500 before retesting wherever the median is at some point, probably in the next 5 to 10 days is what I'm saying. So after that, then yeah, there might be continuation of the downside. Don't get me wrong. But right now, I'd be betting on a continuation of this bounce attempt into the deeper 90s, more or less. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got for the Bitcoins today. I guess there is one last thing. I did kind of fuck up over here, and I forgot to, well, actually, no, we don't need to get into that. But I was going to say, for the people who actually are paying attention on the weekends, the sale technically is still going on. I didn't realize that I made the sale end date like on Monday for whatever reason. The code is still the same, blacked in all capitals and 20. But yeah, if you're listening over the weekend, well, there you go. Last chance for 20% off of any one of the programs or services in the teachable link in the description below. Other than that, I'm going to continue on with this series. I've really been enjoying it. Basically, my message for this week, or at least what I'm doing this week, is I'm continuing to hold those long positions. If we do lose last week's low, then yes, I will start to shave off a little bit, just kind of trade around. But other than that, I mean, as far as individualistic stocks, I did make some moves here. I bought some Rigetti on that move to the downside around 23.5. I'm still holding that. I did buy some GM as well, just based off of this monthly breakout here. Again, very long-term hold in the low 70s. What else did I do? Yeah, that's pretty much it for what I did in traditional markets. More or less, I'm just holding right now. I don't want to be adding too much. I think the time to add was, of course, on that last pullback that we saw on SPY and NASDAQ. Whenever I see a 5 or 10% pullback, respectively, for those two major indices, I'm probably going to put a little bit more money to work. I didn't get any major signals for long-term investments this past week, but so I didn't go super heavy on the bid. But in this case, yeah, I did add to positions here. And again, just holding right now. These are for very long-term investments. I'll continue to update on what I'm doing each and every week, not because I'm going to be 100% correct or 100% right, but just to be transparent and to let you know what I'm doing. And also just to document it for myself, because again, I'm going to have to do this work anyways. So other than that, did I do anything over here? No, I didn't do anything with triple Qs, just holding there. Yeah, and I did add a little bit on ITA. This is one of my major defense ETFs. A little bit on ITA, just around $200. I think that this one does have potential to come down significantly, to be honest with you. But the big portion of my position is from much lower. So if this thing does correct down to 180, I will add a lot more there. But until then, that's what I'm looking at for this coming week. We'll continue to update this on each and every passing Sunday. And other than that, wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow for another live stream.